So a little video to talk about the two core phases of Fairbairn-Sykes era World War II combatives. And they really boil down into two subdivisions of approaches. And it's really important to think and remember that this is really more of a curricula than a style. There's nothing that you'll find in guides like this that you can't find on ancient wall murals and in books and treatises going back hundreds and thousands of years. There is not a single really unique thing you can find there. What makes it interesting is the context, the World War II element, which we all find very fascinating, and the curricula. What things have we decided to exclude and what things have we decided to include, and the manner in which we teach them, because that's a very exciting and interesting prospect to us today, because it's how do you get people that might not always be physically robust, think SOE, think agents, think operatives, how do you get those people to be physically competent and psychologically confident in the minimum viable time? And that's what really makes it fascinating, the curricula, as opposed to the techniques themselves, which can be found anywhere and everywhere. So the two phases as I see it, the kind of two bundles that identifiably make up World War II combatives. I think the first is the proactive / preemptive bundle of techniques, and they make up the mainstay of the early portions of the book. So we're looking at edge of hand blows, shin jabs, you'd be looking at Japanese strangle from the front, you'd be looking at boot kicks to the knee. When it comes to the armed sections, you'd be looking at use of the stick, because the use of the stick in the World War II combative section is really a tool of ambush and surprise, done from a distance of dialogue, and the use of the knife as a sentry elimination tool. All of these things, these strikes, these cuts, these uses of the stick, they are often, very often, preemptive in nature. You have decided to go first, you've decided to be violent first, and therefore you're looking to overwhelm the enemy with repeated uses of that single thing, i.e. repeated edge of hand blows, or combinations or flurries of all of those techniques to overwhelm the opposition before they know they're in a fight. And it's the same with the sentry elimination. It's preemptive because they don't know it's coming. You've decided, boom, in and done. You have made the decision. And it's important that really is a priority in training, because it's always superior to be in a position where you decide to engage, when to engage, where to engage, and whom to engage with. You know, a psychological mainstay of World War II combatives is just that. Like I said, it's really, really fascinating that in such a short period of time, how can we make people that might not be physically robust, might not have experience, how do we make them competent and likely to stay alive for longer? So the first module is in preemption. And preemption is very, very important. If we look at the 1943 syllabus from Sykes, you know, of the 6 lessons, lesson 1 is pretty much all psychology and edge of hand blows. Smash, crash, 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 hit. You know, if you think about it, that's a huge percentage of training time dedicated to one tool and the mindset to use it. So that preemption, that having decided to go first, is really, really important, and it should make up a core part and portion of your training time. So module 1 about preemption, and it's important, I think, to psychologically think about what I'm doing. Am I teaching preemption? And in a World War II context, this might be where you feel like your dialogue is failing, where you feel like your false documents are failing, where you might like to burst in and whoop some ass. All of these things, whether you decide to do it dynamic or via deception and dialogue, you have decided, you have chosen, and you have acted first. And that is always, always, always superior and typically a lot more effective than the latter portions. So first block, first module, I think the most important bit of World War II combatives is the preemption. You have decided and you have gone. The second facet is all about dealing with what we now call habitual acts of physical violence. What really basic things do humans do when they resort to unarmed violence? And typically this is the same all the way around the world, all the way through time. We're looking at headlocks, being pushed, being pulled, being accosted by the arm, all of these things. And predominantly, these are grappling orientated. Humans are natural grapplers. As soon as we've gone past the flurry of strikes, typically we will resort to crushing and squeezing and holding, bear hugging. All of these things we tend to do very, very naturally. But it's very important to look at how to counter those things. Because if you've decided to go preemptive and you've not quite been able to finish the job, because humans are robust and you might not always be the biggest fish, you're going to have to turn that. That fight might take longer than you think, and they will fight back, and they will fight back with just as much venom and intensity and maybe more skill and more training than you. There's also the second part in that we're not always that switched on. We're not always that aware, and shit happens, and fortune isn't always on your side. So you can be amazing at all the preemption stuff, but you still get tired, and you still drink, and you still communicate, and you still get distracted, and you still trust the wrong people. And so you can be blindsided, accosted, gripped up, held, arrested. All of these things can happen to you, and therefore you have to react to it. So the second pillar is all about how do we react to HAPV, habitual acts of physical violence. Those headlocks, those holds, those body locks, those natural things that humans do. Well, you'll note that, especially in the Fairbairn-Sykes material, there's nothing really to do with stopping or preventing strikes. It is assuming that that ship has sailed. Unless you've got really good training, knowing how to parry, block, cover, smother, crash into and around strikes is difficult. You've either got the drop on someone, in which case it's you hacking them first, or they've got the drop on you, in which case you're going to have to weather that initial storm, stay on balance, and then deliver your counter offences to habitual acts of physical violence. And you'll see huge portions of the book are dedicated to what if they're gripping your throat? What if they're gripping your hair? What if they're gripping your waist? What are they doing? So you'll see that the holds, the trips, the throws that you see, they tend to manifest as a counter to something that has happened to you. So I'd say really two core modules: assault, preemptive assault, and counter assault, dealing with things that have happened to you. And ideally, if you've got very little training time, your focus should be a lot more on the former than it should be on the latter. And I think it's very, very interesting. And you see how when Sykes starts to put his own flavour into the curricula in the UK and Commonwealth 1943 notes, that a lot of the more police style second module, counters to HAPV, locks, holds, throws, a lot of those things that might have been favoured early by Fairbairn are put aside with logic and reason and notes that are made available by Sykes during that time, focusing a lot more on the preemptive assault elements and really redacting and boiling down that syllabus and matching the right aggressive mindset as opposed to defensive. If they do that, I do this. We start to see in the kind of Sykes reading and telling of it, it's a lot more, this is what I'm going to do to you, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. But it's an interesting thing psychologically. But yeah, I'd absolutely say in the context of Fairbairn-Sykes World War II combatives and the curricula of mid to the latter years of the war, you start to see this manifest. A focus on preemption and counter-assault, with the weighting going increasingly towards preemption. Where counter-assault does come into its own is looking at things like dealing with being held up by firearms, being marched and moved. And it's important not to discount those facets, because if you think about it, you being held, accosted, pinned, dragged, that's only going to lead to catastrophic results to those who are pinned, dragged and taken. Because if you're accosted, you're going to get taken to somewhere. And when you're taken to somewhere, you will be tortured. And when you are tortured, you will spill the beans. And you spilling the beans will endanger lives of people you love, people that are depending on you. Could be magnitudes, could be hundreds of thousands of people's lives at stake because of you being captured, you not being able to fight back, you not being able to escape that headlock, that choke, that pin. So the counter assault is very, very, very important facet, but it's just an interesting way to break down the curricula. Priority 1, you decide, you choose, you go first. Preemptive assault, sentry elimination, unarmed blitz and attack. 2, if unfortunately the drop has been come to you, you have been surprised and you have been assaulted, how to quickly and calmly and efficiently reverse those fortunes, escape that grasp, escape that hold, and then get back to plan A, which is filling that space with violence and making it your choice and your decisions and your will moving forward. So an interesting way to A, think about the evolution of combatives throughout the war, and B, think about how those kind of two subsystems coincide. And if you're a teacher of this kind of stuff, or you build it into your curricula, it's important thinking, am I drilling preemptive assault? Am I drilling counters to habitual acts of physical violence? Because those are different psychologically and contextually, and it makes it a lot easier for people if you put them in those two boxes, and they can start to understand, ideally, we want to go with option number 1. However, shit happens, life happens, we may have to resort to option number 2, so you need to be ready for it and have a ready response, tuned in, locked in, and good to go. So that's a little bit of a breakdown from my perspective on the curricula and how the two phases of World War II combatives kind of go together.